McDaniel can't move on it. Now he does. The shot, passing down. Rebound, score!
Hey, welcome to the Toe and the Crease podcast, where we talk about anything and everything to do with the NHL. On a lazy Saturday, I'm SJ. That's the co-host, Willie Dubs.
What's up, everyone? Please ignore that earlier bit. I was just tossing something to the side.
I love this Saturday so far. Okay, so this is the Saturday before the Super Bowl. And there's always, it's always nice because the Super Bowl, as much as this is a hockey podcast.
So technically it's a lie because it's not, the Saturday before the Super Bowl is next week, technically, because the Super Bowl's...
Sorry, yeah, but the week before the Super Bowl, right?
Okay.
Everything dominates that week. And look, hockey podcast, I admit it, right? There's no shame in it. I do like that, the Saturday before, though. One, I love that the NHL is getting all these trades in now because it just makes it so much easier to cover. And two, I do like that, a lot of hockey games are happening. The Royal Rumble, I'm a big wrestling fan. That's going on right now, too. So it's just an awesome Saturday for me. What have you been up to?
Honestly, I'm still in Hamilton for all the folks who are wondering. Still cat sitting for my sister. One of the cats today seems like they're sick, so that's a little bit concerning. So that was kind of my main concern the other day. Just watch and make sure that nothing looks too out of the ordinary. But I just put some Premier League on. I'm a big Premier League guy. It's quite expensive to watch it on Fubo, but I guess it is what it is.
Streaming services are reaching that point where, I don't know if you have Netflix or Disney Plus, but they just hit me with another price increase on both. And I start to get to the point where, don't get me wrong, overall, it's not sizable, but it's one of those things where I start to weigh, is it worth having Disney Plus if I'm barely used, you know what I mean? That kind of thing.
So I think I decided I went this route where I went for none of the non-sport streaming services. So no Netflix, no Disney Plus, none of that. And I just went for pure sports. So I have the DAZN one that you and I split. So although we have our issues trying to watch at the same time, that's kind of funny. And then the Fubo one, which is for myself, that I just use it to watch the Premier League because I do manage to watch majority of the games on Saturday and Sunday. So for me, it's worth it.
I'm strongly debating cutting Disney Plus as much as I love The Simpsons, but you can always find the old episodes anywhere. Netflix I'm going to keep just because they have the contract with WWE now. So you can watch all the old pay-per-views, which is really cool, and they have the all the pay-per-views on Netflix now anyway. But yeah, I think, and Amazon, Amazon Prime just comes with Amazon Prime anyway, so it doesn't matter. But yeah, no, it's reaching a point where with everything being shuffled to all these different... I remember somebody was recommending a show to me the other day. It's, I forget what's called. It's about a legal case, and Jake Gyllenhaal's in it. And Jake Gyllenhaal is, one of my favorite actors, right? Anything he's in, I will watch, because it's usually pretty good. But they were yeah, it's on Apple TV. And I looked, and I'm this is another thing I have to sign up for. You know what I mean? So, it's starting to reach the point of what cable used to be, which I'm just not a fan of because I thought the whole idea of streaming was to move away from the cost of cable, right?
I was gonna joke. It feels like they're going back in time instead of going forwards because like you said, with the prices and everything. For me, there's only two shows that I actually really want to watch. So the first one is Ted Lasso. I know you mentioned this to me in the past because you thought it was actually one of the ones I would be watching, but funny enough, I just don't have one of the services to watch it. And the second one, I watched a little bit of it with my friend on Amazon Prime, but I guess the Beast Games, that one, just kind of curious to see how that turns out. Although I feel like people are probably going to judge me because they'll be like, oh, it's probably more of a show for 9-year-olds because it's the show that's run by Mr. Beast. That one,
okay,
where he does the games and then I guess someone can win $1 million or something. I don't know.
My sister and I have just been watching Arcane. The League of Legends, which is actually pretty good. I wasn't actually expecting it to be.
Do any of you actually play League is the question?
No. That's what makes it better. See, okay, with things like that, that's what makes it better because when you're not into the lore, I feel like you can enjoy it more. Do you know what I mean? Because everyone that plays the games always criticize. Harry Potter's a good example. I just watched the movies. The movies were fine. Everyone that read the books would always criticize the movies. So I kind of am in that boat where I'm okay with it. Yeah, Arcane's...
I think that's the thing. Everyone just nitpicks oh, you got this detail wrong. That's not right. I think the Harry Potter one deserves an exception because it's hard to fit I think the first book was like, is it 700 pages, 500 pages? It's a decent amount of pages. It's hard to fit that much content into a movie, right?
Yeah.
So you have to omit certain details, or you have to maybe kind of fudge the truth a little bit just to fit the storyline, right? It happens.
Yeah. That I've just been watching the show called The Night Agent. It's just like a random Netflix one. But yeah, anyways, aside from our TV watching habits, like I said, the NHL came fast and furious with all these trades. Like, we were originally going to do a trade deadline tier list of like guys we thought would be moved, and then all these trades just started filling in, and we're like, okay, we'll move that to like next week because trades are still going on. We're just going to recap a lot of trades and signings that happened this week, just because, and what the impacts are on the league, basically. And it started with what I thought was one of the craziest trades. Did you want to start with like the biggest trade and move down, or did you want to just start with the minor?
I'm okay with anything. Let's. I guess do you already have a plan in mind? I was just gonna go with the flow. I just have all the notes.
Let's just go with the biggest one, the Mikko Rantanen trade. So for me, this was crazy because I was literally at a video. You want to talk about an unexpected trade that happened? I was at a video game cafe with a friend, and I just randomly saw a notification about this, and I thought it was a joke at first.
I was getting Papa John's pizza, and I saw you text me about it. That's how I found out about it. So,
and I was stunned. Like, first of all, I don't know how to explain it. When I saw this trade, it was almost like a fantasy hockey trade. Do you get what I mean? Where it's it's one of those trades where there's not a lot of future capital involved. It's the core of this trade is just a star player for it's like you're trading it's one roster player for two, right? And it's something you'd see in like a fantasy hockey league. And that's what caught me off guard the most, I think, when I first saw it. And also, like, when's the last time two title contenders made a trade of this magnitude during the season?
Well, I think first things first, usually around trade deadline time, it's always the contenders trading with the bottom feeders, right? The bottom feeders unloading whatever little assets they have left. They try to get picks back. They try to, I call it, continue to tank. That's really what they're trying to do, right? But I think in this case, I mean, I want to say two contenders, right? I think it's fair to say two
contenders, absolutely.
Yeah. So two cup contenders coming together for a blockbuster of a trade. That was definitely not on I forget which day it was, but that definitely wasn't something I had on my mind.
Tkachuk for Huberdeau and Weegar happened, but that was in the off-season trades. Off-season. I get. I can't. Can you remember the last time two contenders made a trade in season like this? I can't.
I'm trying to think. I don't have one off the top of my mind. No.
Neither do I. That's what I mean. That's what's crazy. That was one thing that was crazy about it to me. I think the other thing too is like, when's the last time during the season a player of this magnitude, like Gensel got traded last year, but we're talking about a top 10, top 15 player in the league. Definitely a top 5 winger in the league, absolutely.
I'd say top 3. I'd probably go top 3 even.
When's the last time a player like that got traded?
I'm trying to think. Even some of the other
Eichel wasn't.
Eichel was like top.
Yeah,
I'd say maybe top 100, top 50, but he was still coming off. There was like question marks and concerns with him, right? Because we weren't sure.
100%,
okay, are they going to let him get the surgery? Because the whole thing that hinged was the surgery. Are they going to let him get the experimental surgery, right? Whereas Rantanen, fully healthy. It's not as if he has question marks. He's going to come back this year.
He wasn't Aaron Hernandezing in his spare time. Yeah, no, it's just that's what made this trade so shocking to me. Is guys like this. Teams like this don't trade with each other during the season. Guys like this don't get traded during the season. And it's also kind of interesting because it does feel like, I don't know how to say this, it feels like the end of an era in a way, because I remember watching this.
Well, I was going to joke. The end of the era to me was when they won the cup, because I think that was the last time we saw Landeskog, Rantanen, and McKinnon all on the ice together. Because Landeskog's had
6 of the Stanley Cup Finals.
Landeskog's had his knee issues. I think he had to get that meniscus transplant, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong about the surgery. And then obviously it's just been Rantanen and McKinnon since then.
It's just crazy because at their best, that was the most dominant line in the league. It had everything. It had McKinnon's speed. It had the physicality with Landeskog. the size and ability to score from like anywhere with Rantanen, and they all complemented each other so well. Again, saying this as a Stars fan, like to me, that was the most dominant line in the league, and it's crazy that the last time they're ever going to play again was that Game 6 3 years ago. And it's weird to end of the era in the sense that I definitely thought that core that won the Stanley Cup would have done more. Like, obviously, they won the Cup, right?
I think you would have thought there'd be more years together, right? But I think everything just kind of fell apart between Nichushkin. I think last year getting getting suspended or getting leaving for personal issues in the middle of the playoffs, Landeskog's injuries, and then I guess the Avalanche dealing with a bunch of minor injuries throughout, and then them having to trade their goalie at one point too, or they had to let go of Kemper I think that very off season, right? They had to let go of Kemper. I think all the little pieces kind of slowly dwindled away, and then between the injuries, drug issues, quote unquote, we'll leave it at that, and then this trade now, all the pieces kind of slowly trickled out of Colorado, kind of.
No, like it's weird though, because if you think about it, they won the Cup, right? Again, not gonna sugarcoat that, or sorry, not gonna like put that under the radar. But outside of that, they haven't made it past the second round. If you think about it,
I mean, again, I think it comes down to that combination of not having the full team around, right? And then
no, but
the cup. I call it the cup. I call it the cup tax too, because after you win the cup, there's usually some sort of quote unquote tax where you basically have to pay all your guys, right?
Think of other teams that have like look at Florida has made 2 cup finals, right? Like Vegas has made a couple deep runs with their core. Even Edmonton.
But I think those are exceptions though, because I hate to say this, but they didn't have to. There wasn't a lot of guys they had to pay, like pay, right? I think in Florida's case they let Montour go, but I think that was the big one. And they paid Reinhart, fair. But I think with Colorado, between they had to pay. I think they gave Nichushkin that 8-year deal. They gave Manson that loaded contract. They had to pay a lot of their guys, and it cost them some key players such as Kemper, right? And Kemper was pretty good for them coming off that cup.
I don't know. I just for a team with that much talent, I expected so much more. And don't worry, again, I hate to say this for the millionth time. Like they won the cup, I get it, but I kind of expected once they won that one too. I kind of expected like a Tampa, Chicago run, kind of where they would just dominate the West for the next X amount of years. And it's weird that that's not going to happen, at least with this iteration of the team.
Again, I think bad luck, money, and just a bunch of things just kind of hit it. It was the perfect storm that kind of derailed their run. That's the way I see it. Also, I think for me, I thought Rantanen would be a Avalanche for life. Maybe that's just me. I did not think
every team has the 3, right? Like if you think about it, for Chicago, it was basically Kane, Taves. You could include Seabrook, but it was Kane, Taves, and Keith, right? You think about Tampa, it's going to be Hedman, Kucherov, and Vasilevsky most likely. You look at Pittsburgh, it was
Crosby, Malkin, Letang.
Right. And you think about Washington, it was supposed to be Carlson, Green, Carlson,
Backstrom.
Ovechkin, Backstrom, Ovechkin. Yeah, sorry. But obviously Backstrom's done. But all those teams have those guys, those core guys. It's just weird that it's only going to... I mean, Landeskog, I guess, counts, but he's just been hurt so much. It's really just Makar and McKinnon, right? So discussing this trade, before we discuss it, I just have a couple premises here. Let me know if you agree or disagree.
Okay.
If we had... Number one, if we had proposed a Natchez and Drury for Rantanen trade, which is essentially what this is, right? In the offseason last year, prior to this season, somebody would have banned you for trolling. Can we agree with that?
Yeah. I think when I saw the trade, I was shocked it was for that little. Because even if you keep in mind, there's the retained cap, they had to involve a third team for the retained cap and everything, right? But I would have thought at least a first or something else would be another asset would be thrown their way, right? Or one of Carolina's prospects.
Can we just say before talking about this, we would agree that this trade, there's no way this would have happened in the offseason.
You're getting banned from the r/NHL subreddit for sure.
Okay, so to me at that point, if I'm going past that, the change was based on either one of two things. Did player performance change in a substantial way, or did someone's cost not become palatable? And that's what we'll talk about. So do we agree with that premise?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think to answer the whole point thing, I don't know. I guess apart from Natchez having, I guess, a quote unquote career year, Rantanen's been the same. It's not as if his performance has gone like down the drain, right?
All right. So moving on to the last premise here, before we discuss this trade,
Yep.
it would seem logical that there would be another trade, kind of like when the Wedgwood trade happened. I assume there would be another one, but
And then, yeah,
I'm
that
not
would
creating
happen.
hypotheticals as to what Colorado is going to do or Carolina. We're just going to evaluate the trade on its own. Is that fair?
Yep. Let's do it as its own. Yep.
Okay. So first, let's just talk about the Chicago thing. I'll be honest, I really don't care about Chicago's part in this trade. Yes, they retained on Rantanen. They gave up Hall, who was basically a negative asset. And they got a third back, which everyone's ripping them on for because they felt like they could have got more. But I think what they really wanted was their own third-round pick. Because if they got a third-round pick from Colorado or Carolina, that's really closer to like a fourth. Whereas their own third-round pick's probably going to be in the top 5. So I think getting less but getting a more valuable pick was really the difference there. Outside of this, I like honestly, Hall was a negative contract for them, and just getting out of it for retention, I think like I don't really have a strong opinion on them one way or another. They were fine. Like
I think on a random topic, it feels weird with Hall because everyone forgets he's a first overall pick, and it feels weird that he's been
and
with
a
so many
former
teams.
MVP.
And a former MVP, but it feels again
Yeah.
he won. It felt I don't want to say that MVP year kind of felt off, but he was good in Edmonton. Don't get me wrong,
He's
but the
definitely
MVP,
one of the weirdest career guys for sure. I think like if you look at his career arc, it's definitely one of the weirdest, especially for a guy that was a first overall pick and won MVP. It is weird how many teams he's been on and like how his career went from basically a point per game peak to just being discard fodder for
yeah.
other teams.
I
Right?
think just to recap, it was Edmonton, New Jersey,
You're
I think
forgetting,
Arizona,
yeah, Phoenix.
Arizona, and then I think it was Buffalo, and then Boston, I
Yeah.
think, and
Yeah.
then I think Chicago, right? I don't know if I'm missing one
Yeah.
in between. It was
And
something
now
like that,
Carolina. Yeah,
and then now Carolina, exactly. Yeah,
I think he's been on. Yeah, he's been on in every division in the NHL basically.
he's going the Mike Cylinder. He's going the Mike Cylinder route. He's trying to get all the jerseys, man. I'm telling you, got to catch them all.
He's gonna be like the answer for so many immaculate grids. Also, like he's the basically the NHL's version of where in the world is Carmen San Diego right now. Yeah, like I don't really have a strong opinion on Chicago's part. They got a higher third round pick. They took on a bit of retention. I don't have a like. It's not that big a deal one way or another. For Carolina, I love this trade. I think it's a home run swing. I think they put on the helmet and took a Barry Bonds level cut. And this is a trade, honestly, they had to make. Like, I think in the playoffs, what they always struggled with from watching their games was an elite scorer that can score from a variety of angles, like backhand, forehand, tips coming out of the corner, plus someone with size. And I think Rantanen really fits that. Also, I really do feel like this is more of a playoff mood because given how Rod Brindamore allots time on ice to his guys, like he's very opposite from Jared Bednar, where Bednar will play his top line like 23, 24. In some cases, like some games you'll see 25 minutes a game. I think Brindamore always errs towards a more balanced rotation like the Stars, where it's like everyone's in that 18 range. But I do expect Rantanen to have success here after a feeling out period. What are your thoughts on Rantanen as he fits the roster?
I mean, I think Carolina needed that superstar player, right? Because I think, like you said, the one thing they struggle with is they don't have that X factor when it comes to the playoffs. They've also never had that player that's truly above a point per game. I want to make an exception for Aho because he's kind of on and off. Some years he gets there, some years he doesn't. He's a good center. He's a solid player. He's a great player to have, but they don't have that X factor to pair with him because Svechnikov never really turned into that. And Necas was, I hate to say this, apart from this year, he was literally Jekyll Hyde, inconsistent and just never got it done, right? So I think it pairs perfectly. You pair the two Finnish guys together, makes it even better that they're same nationality. I think they'll be fine. Give them some time to feel it out. They'll be fine. And if you're Carolina too, you were going to have to pay Necas in, I think, at the end of next year, right? So you're just moving the can, like instead of kicking the can down the road, you're kind of moving it forward and just saying screw it. Let's take our best shot at this to push for a cup, right? And I think when a guy like Rantanen is available, I don't want to say it doesn't matter the cost. It's not that it doesn't matter the cost, but if it's a steep cost, you have to go with it regardless when a guy like him is available.
Well, also like the core, I get they, some of the core was let go basically in the offseason and not re-signed, but there is an issue. There was an issue that this team again would reach the playoffs, maybe make the second round, and just feel outclassed to an extent again against elite talent. And there was that fear of like that stasis kicking in. So I love this trade for them from that standpoint. And also they're in the prime driver's seat to resign him, right? Like Carolina has a lot of cap opening up this offseason. So here are their expiring contracts coming up. Orlov at 7.75 million, Burns at 5.28, Roslovich at 2.8, Hall's coming up at 6 million, right? And then Rantanen's own cap hold, which is 4.625 right now with the Chicago retention. Yeah, they'll need to replace some of those guys, but like that's around $29.5 million in cap space, excluding the potential cap going up. And to me, it's like they're basically right there, and they're probably the team with the most cap space that's a contender. Because yes, Detroit, Chicago, teams like that, maybe Minnesota can throw money at Rantanen, but if he wants to win plus get paid, Carolina's in the driver's seat. So I think where last year they were kind of cap hamstrung, so they couldn't sign Gensel. This year they have a lot of cap, so this is like the perfect time to make a trade like this. And also, they have options to replace some of those guys on ELCs as well, because I think they're really high on Nikishin, who's supposed to come up, and some of the other guys like Nedjo and Unger Sorum are in the AHL.
Yeah, Unger Sorum, yeah. They have one of the, I don't want to say, they don't have a deep prospect pool, but it's one of those prospect pools where I think because they all kind of came around at the same time, they're all sort of going to be ready for next year. So I think their whole play was screw it, like let's if we're going to make a play to re-sign Rantanen, we can use some of these ELC guys to offset some of the losses, such as Orlov or some of the other forwards like Roslovich, right? So they're just going to take their chance with the young guys and roll with them. And I think just because it's Carolina, I feel like Rob Brindamore is going to find a way to make it work. I think there's one thing I've learned about that team is it doesn't matter who they lose or how. For example, they lost Brett Pesce. They lost one of their best, I guess, defensemen or best defensive defensemen, right? And again, they're still exactly, and so they're still good. I don't think anything has changed. Some of these guys
like weren't going to come back anyway. Like Hall wasn't going to come back. Frederick Anderson probably not going to come back because they're probably going to get a younger, less injury-prone goalie for that cap hold. And Burns pretty much wasn't coming back anyway. So
he feels like he's on his last legs, right?
Yeah. So I love this trade for Carolina. Again, you get some familiarity too with the Rantanen-Aho pairing. I do think it's going to take some time for Rantanen to get used to it because it is a completely different system and it's a lot less free-flowing than Colorado's is. But I do think eventually he'll figure it out with them. And you do need him, and realistically, I think they want him for the playoffs, and he's a proven playoff performer. I love this trade for Carolina.
I think speaking of Colorado, I don't love this trade for Colorado. I think that's probably the same sentiment you share with me, right?
This one's weird for Colorado because, so there's a couple things. One, I'm of a couple beliefs. One, pay your studs. In a cap era, like every team that has been successful has done it with a couple studs and cycling through the rest of the roster. You think of Chicago, right? It was the constants were always Taves, Kane, Keith, Seabrook. You think
Sharp
of
too. I think Sharp as well. And then you figured out the other five and Crawford. You figured out the others 14 guys on the roster. You just said, okay, exactly. We'll figure this out.
Like, remember, I think about how many guys they had that cycled through that team, right? Bufflin, Eager, Versteeg, Boland. Yeah, like
Panarin for a bit too. They went every route to try to get other players to kind of fill the roster, right? They just stuck with those six, like I'll call it the core six, and just said, okay, we'll figure out the chess pieces or the rest of the pieces behind it.
And Pittsburgh was the same, right? Malkin, Crosby, Letang, and everybody else was cycling.
I would say Flurry too for an extent before they got rid of him, but then they were like, okay, we'll just figure out, okay, who's the backup? Pick up random defensemen
and think through all the guys, right? Carter, Kunitz, Raquel, Hagelin, Kessel, like so many guys have come. Yeah. And Rust. Boston was the same too, right? It was Bergeron, Krejci, Marchand, McAvoy, Chara. Rask. Yeah. Like
Chara back in the day too. Yeah. You had those 6 or 7 and you just kind of filled the pieces around them. I think that's why you have studs, right? You just you let those studs kind of propel whichever other pieces you put
It's a
in the
lot harder
roster.
to replace. Yeah, it's a lot harder to replace your stud than it is the depth guys. And the problem is when you replace them with depth guys, is you do eventually like any team that has fallen apart has not fallen apart because of their studs. It's always because they've overvalued a depth player or overpaid a depth player or traded the wrong guy. And that's why I've always been a proponent of just paying your studs because your studs are your consistent variables year in and year out. And the other thing too is the other thing I'm not a fan of is when you have McCarr and McKinnon healthy every year. To me, every year is a contention year. There's
Well,
no
one other thing I want to highlight too is I think their goaltending situation. They actually, it looked like they finally figured that out too. So I was like, if you finally figured out your goalie situation, because from what it looks like, you traded for a better goalie because I assume the assumption is you want to be a contender, right? Because if you're
this year,
if you're going out and trading away Georgiev, trading away Annunen, and you're trying to upgrade your goaltending, it means you're trying to make a run for it, right? So this trade seems kind of counterintuitive. You traded for better goalies, but then you traded one of your studs for, I guess, a lesser player. It just doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know.
So what I got from it is they're taking because if you think about it, Natchez and Drury for Rantanen makes you worse this year. And especially this year with the way the Central is, like the Jets and Hellebuck are humming. Dallas looks again Stars fan, so there is bias here, but Dallas looks really good. Minnesota's randomly stepped up, and forget the Central. Vegas and Edmonton look great right now, right? So you're taking a step back this year, but I think the idea is it's weird because have you ever heard the saying, a bird in the hand is better than two in the bush?
Kind of.
So what it means is the one you have is better than the two hypotheticals. Colorado reversed it because I think the idea is, yeah, they might take a step back this year, but Natchez at his cap hold next year, plus whatever free agent they can sign, will be better than having Rantanen at his price next year, which I don't know if that's the case, but
I'm not a fan of
that's
that
the bet
personally.
they're making, I think.
I'm not a fan of the bet at all. One thing, first of all, you know what Rantanen's going to give you. The guy is about as surefire, consistent as you can come. He's going to be a 100-point guy. I hate to say this, but Natchez has been extremely inconsistent throughout his NHL career. I think he's bounced around anywhere between 0.6 to 0.8 or 0.9 points per game, and it feels like you never know what you're going to get out of him. And then this year you got the career year, and then next year you still have to pay him after next year. So why not just pay Rantanen and just keep things simple? Sure, it's gonna suck because you're gonna have less cap for some of your other depth guys, but I hate to say this, but you could probably figure out those depth guys. Maybe you make one of those free agent college signings, or you just pick up a guy on a prove it deal. I'd rather try to figure those guys out than to try to figure out your studs. And
so I think what this trade highlights, and sorry for interrupting there, is how bad Colorado has been at that recently, right? If you think about it, what's hurt Colorado isn't Rantanen or his production. It's Landeskog being hurt but not being not going on LTIR. It's Nichushkin's inconsistency off ice, deciding to
yeah,
live out his Scarface life. And if you look at the rest of the roster, the Middlestat for Byram trade hasn't worked out for them the way they wanted.
well, that's there's no either party to be fair, but
I think Byram's been decent in Buffalo.
He's been okay, but I think again, I don't think that's you can't really point to that deal as the problem. It's just
that all the draft picks, we talked about it. If you look at the draft picks after Rantanen, after Rantanen and Makar, it's basically they've hit on nothing in the first round. Really, there's no guys on ELCs that are outplaying their value, and because of that, it creates this issue with the depth. The issues with the depth in the lineup are Colorado's own making. Yes, there was some bad luck with Landeskog and Nichushkin, but the rest of it is on their own doing.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think one thing I do want to point out is I think we might talk. Maybe I'll spoil one of the future topics, but there is the talk of the rising cap, right? And the cap's going to be rising within the next few years. The one thing I saw that was interesting was it was rumored that the top offer that the Avalanche made to Rantanen was an 8-year deal worth $11.75 million per year. So the interesting thing about that was that would have made him the highest paid winger in the league. I think the fifth highest like annual value, and then the sixth most valuable contract in the NHL. I think the interesting thing was it was mentioned that Colorado didn't want to, pay him that 13, 14 mil. And then there was, there was rumors that came out after the trade that, or I guess Rantanen came out and said it himself, essentially, that he would have taken a significant discount. I guess my whole thing is, if that, I guess the cap news came out after, but with the way the NHL is going, surely the cap probably won't go down, right? So like, if is it really worth haggling that last 2-3 million with Rantanen and then just trading him?
I have a conspiracy theory on this. I don't ever think Colorado was ever going to sign him at market rate. I think he would have had to take a serious discount. So here's my point of comparable, right? Panarin signed for, I think it was around 11.6 million with New York in 2019. If you look at Panarin's...
But he took I think Panarin took a discount, though, because I think it was mentioned that like teams such as the Islanders... I think the Islanders technically offered him more. It's just, I think the Big Apple with the Rangers was just fit Panarin a bit more.
Sure. So 2019, though, so 6 years ago, 11.6. With going into free agency, way less of a track record than Rantanen, right? Pasternak last year signed for 11.25 mil, which I thought was maybe the closest comparable. But again, that was during a flat cap, right? So to me, it's like if Pasternak signed for around 11.25 and you in a flat cap, and now the cap's expected to go up substantially, like what number were the Avs comfortable with? Because it doesn't seem like they were comfortable with anything that would indicate a rising cap. And like, here's the thing. Brandon's number would be higher because if he goes to free agency, like I said, Detroit, Chicago, like maybe Minnesota. I can't remember if the cap penalties are gone on them, but they're a possibility.
I think Minnesota's. I think they're pretty close to getting out of it. But I think my whole point is it just doesn't make sense to not. Maybe it's just me, but it doesn't make sense to just not. It doesn't make sense that they just didn't pay him because I hate to say he's your second best player, third best player. Essentially,
I just really think if you look at, again, the idea that the cap's going up, what other guys signed for, what other teams could have thrown at him this offseason, I don't think Colorado was ever going to sign him at market rate. I think the whole thing was he would have had to take a serious, like I'm talking 10 million maybe discount. And honestly, he shouldn't, right? Like it's not, he's doing his job. He's not the issue with Colorado's
I think that's my problem with Colorado, though, is just I don't understand why they just didn't pay him. With all, I guess obviously the cap information's like in hindsight because the rising cap news came out after the Rantanen trade, right? But I think you have to assume it doesn't make sense for the cap to just suddenly go down. Like worst case, it's flat, which I mean not great, but like 12, 13 mil, like. I don't know if that would have gotten it done, but you would have at least gotten a lot closer to maybe Rantanen's number, right? And maybe at that point you can actually work something out.
I just really think Colorado wanted to bet on the depth, and again, betting on the idea that whoever they sign in the next year plus Natchez will be better than what Rantanen's output is, and who knows. But
well, I mean, again, betting on the depth hasn't really worked out for Colorado so far, has it?
But the problem is they're worse this year.
I'd argue they're going to be worse next year too. I argue they're just worse overall, not just this year.
Depending on who they sign, I don't know about that, but they're going to be worse this year for sure. And I don't like. It's funny because they made a trade for depth, but you compare their depth to a team like Winnipeg and Dallas, it's still bad. Like so. And even Edmonton's deeper than they are too. Obviously, like you look at Edmonton's lines 2 to 4, it's way better than what Colorado has. Vegas's depth just shits on Colorado too. So yeah, like this is a step back for me this year with Colorado. Next year, depending on who they sign, it could be a step forward. But then you run into the other issue of if Natchez plays the way you want him to, what are you going to sign him at? And now you have no leverage with Natchez and Makar. Because if you think about it, Natchez knows what you just traded. If I'm Natchez's agent, I'm like, hey, I know what you just traded for him. So I'm going to get mine. And if I'm Makar, like, I'm coming in with a blank check. Because you basically cleared out the only other guy on the roster that should be getting above what Nathan McKinnon's making right now. So if I'm coming with you, like, honestly, if I'm Makar, I would not be surprised if in 2 years, like, over 15 million was his AAV. Unless he took a discount.
Yeah,
not be surprising.
with the rising cap news, yeah, seems about right.
Do you have any other thoughts on this trade? So overall, I think for Carolina, this is a home run swing, and I love it. For Colorado,
It
it's
feels like two massive steps back.
Colorado. It feels like a hedge for the now, potential for the future, and for Chicago, it's just business for a rebuilding team.
Yep, that makes sense.
All right, moving on to the next big trade. I mean, can I say for this one, for once the dirt sheets were right all along. JT Miller moved in one of the weirdest sagas I can remember for a contending team.
It's funny because for folks who don't know, there's been rumors going on of a feud between Elias Pettersson and JT Miller for the past few months. Both have denied it in the media, but it was quite funny when I think Rutherford, their GM, just came out and said, "Yeah, they're they're having problems," and just kind of just aired it out there and just said, "Screw it, I don't want to lie about this anymore. They're having issues," and then you knew that at some point one of them was going to have to go. So and then the bombshell dropped. So.
I think what's weird to me is for everyone talks about how hockey players are the toughest modern gladiators, but man, emotionally, sometimes I read stuff about these guys and I just don't get it.
Do you have the emotional level of a celery or something?
How is it so bad you couldn't work it out? I remember, again, maybe this is my age showing, but Shaq and Kobe, Jordan and Pippen, they hated, just using examples, it's guys that hated each other, but made it work because they understood the importance of the other guy to winning. And what they did was a lot worse. Kobe went, during the rape allegations, accused Shaq of cheating on his wife, right? Nothing like this ever happened.
Well, I was going to say, the only hockey case I can remember where I actually kind of understood why it wouldn't work was, and this isn't even compared because I guess the names of the players, apart from one of them, isn't that big, but you're the Erik Karlsson, Mike Hoffman one. I think Hoffman's fiance made the comments about Erik Karlsson's wife's not stillborn, right? Those were that was bad. That I understood because that made sense.
Or when the Craig Janney, Brendan Shanahan thing happened with the Blues way back when, because I think allegedly, I can't remember if it was proven that Shanahan slept with Craig Janney's wife, right? But not unless something like that comes out, then sure. But it just seems like they just had different personalities. Because from what I read, JT Miller is the fiery personality who's won't hide that he has a problem, but he's the aggressive type when it comes to if he has a problem with you, he'll let you know, but he'll come to you aggressively and try to work it out and figure it out. Whereas Pettersson's the passive type who has a problem. He's like my sister. If they have a problem, they just keep it inside and they don't really tell you, kind of thing.
And then it kind of bubbles. Does it bubble over at some point? Eventually, you just can't hold it in any longer, kind of thing.
It's that passive aggressive type. So I can see why it didn't work. But again, we're talking about a team that was one game away from making the Western Conference Finals last year. How could you not just work it out?
Again, I think I sometimes think hockey players just have the emotional IQ of zero. I just don't think they have any. I don't see this problem as much in other sports because the issues in other sports are usually more prevalent. I guess between the players there's bigger
It's
issues.
weird because again, as a guy that follows other sports, Barry Bonds and Jeff Kent were on the Giants way back in the
they
in the mid
each other.
Barry Bonds choked out Jeff Kent during a fight, and they still went to the World Series. There's so many I heard so many guys had a problem with Curt Schilling when he was on their team personality-wise, but it didn't matter because he went to the Red Sox, he won. He went to the Diamondbacks, he won, right?
Kind of the same thing with Trevor Bauer too, right? Trevor Bauer, everyone just apparently hates the guy. Although it's gotten to the point where he can't even get an MLB contract. But
Garrett Cole, a lot of players have had issues with issues with Garrett Cole. It doesn't matter because again, when it comes to winning and that guy's really good in other sports, you put it aside. Basketball's had that. Like I said, Shaq and Kobe, Jordan, Pippen. Championship players, dynasty players that didn't like each other. Again, mentioned baseball just as an example. Even in football, I remember Peyton Manning and Mike Vanderjagt didn't like each other. Didn't matter, right? One was a Pro Bowl kicker. One was one of the best quarterbacks of all time. They figured it out for a while until one sucked. That's just what happens. It's just weird to me that a team with the hopes that Vancouver has with players like Pettersson, JT Miller, like Quinn Hughes, like Thatcher Demko, that this just couldn't somehow work out. And unfortunately, when you trade, like the Rangers won this trade, they traded for the best player. Like that's just what it is. Like
They got a point per game. They got a point per game player for. I don't want to say pennies, but it feels like they got him for pennies, right?
Can I say this? I hate the Rangers. Like if there's one team I hate, it's the Rangers because everything always works out for the Rangers, and I don't understand it. Like it just makes no sense.
I was gonna joke. It's like playing GM mode on the easiest setting. You ever really played NHL GM mode? Like you just played on the easiest setting?
The Rangers are that trust fund kid who screws up time after time after time.
But their parents keep giving them money. Their parents keep giving them money. Their parents just keep giving them more and more money.
Like, let's just break this down. They were supposed to go into a deep rebuild after Lundqvist left. That core with the Rangers did what it did. Like, Panarin takes a discount to come to the Rangers because he wants to be there. Adam Fox, literally drafted by a team in the top 10, prefers not to sign there. And just
not top 10. He was a second round pick, but essentially he got drafted by a team. He got traded to another team just to try to get his rights, but he still said, no, I want to go to the Rangers. Eventually signed with the Rangers.
And they get they get an MVP level forward, a Norris level defenseman, one who won a Norris, right?
And they drafted a goalie who turned out to be almost
but besides that, they got Lafreniere in one of the weirdest lotteries we ever had because of COVID. So they got a number one pick for basically nothing.
Well, they also got the second overall pick the year before that too, the Capo Caco. Like they lucked out with that one too, didn't they?
Right, and now they get arguably Miller's issues are
first things first.
Ice.
Before we get to the Miller trade, they shed Jacobs Trouba's salary for literally nothing. Like didn't have.
No, they got to pick back.
They got to pick back. They again NHL GM mode on easy, and then now the JT Miller where they traded pennies for the dollar.
Here's the thing. Miller's issues are only off the ice. And they're not even, Nichushkin issues. They're just, his personality, right? On the ice, though, they just got a top 25 player. Miller at his peak is top 25 player easily. Easily. And, to get him, guys, man. It's just so frustrating to see. Because, there's other teams that don't get those breaks. And the Rangers just get every break in the book.
I'm kind of wondering what level of bullshit is coming up next. Do you ever think what are they gonna do next that's gonna piss us?
Well, they're gonna piss people off because there's a rising cap and it's New York. They're gonna piss somebody off for sure.
Yeah.
But from a play standpoint, it's actually cool because when I will say from a roster standpoint, it's pretty cool because they get to pair Miller with Panarin, which is a great combo. And they finally get to slot the rest of the roster accordingly. Trocheck finally gets to play as a second line center, which I think is his best role. They could even move Zibanejad to the wing or play him at third line center, which honestly he's played like a third line center this year.
Yeah, Zibanejad struggled, and I think they're trying to move his contract, which I think that's the next bullshit that's going to happen. They're going to find a way to make Zibanejad waive his no movement clause, and he's going to get traded to somewhere, and they're not going to have to retain cap, and they're going to somehow get a pick back. I think I can just kind of see that happening at somehow happening.
I will say a Panarin, Miller, Lafreniere line, if that ever comes together, is so scary for most teams in the league. You're talking about grit, size, and playmaking all on the same line. That's going to be frightening if the Rangers end up in the playoffs. My only issue with this trade for the Rangers, again, we're talking about they got the best player. The roster fit is great. The only issue is down the road because this core just got older. If you look at this team, Panarin's 33, Ziba's 31, Miller's 31, Kreider's 33, and they all have clauses that limit their movement in some capacity, so these contracts aren't easy to move. And outside of Lafreniere, Fox, and Miller, there's not a lot of under 30 talent on this team. I'm not including Shesterkin because he's going to turn 30 pretty soon. But by getting rid of Cheadle as well, you're really... this next 2 to 3 years is kind of the Rangers' window, unless Rangers bullshit happens.
They kind of remind me of, I guess, in the NFL, the Saints, kind of what the Saints did, where they kept kicking the can down the road. This kind of feels like what the Rangers are doing. They're just screw it, we're just gonna keep getting good players now, but in a few years, if things don't work out, we're just gonna get utterly screwed by the cap, and we're gonna get stuck with all these players that we can't move. And the contracts, I hate to say this, but at some point they're gonna be bad. Because Father Time, as we know, is undefeated. So Miller's going to eventually regress at some point. Panarin's going to regress. Trocheck, Zibanejad's already regressing. Kreider's already regressed too, and they're looking to they've even scratched him at this point too. So
there's also not a lot of young like ELC talent on this roster, and one of the guys that might have had potential in Mancini, they just traded, right? So it's tough because they got rid of Kako, who's performing now in Seattle randomly. Like now they got rid of Cheeto, who are kind of considered the next wave. Like the next wave is really Lafreniere. Like that's it, right?
I only know two guys for them that could come up. So Brennan Othman and I think Gabe Perreault from the World Juniors, who plays on that Boston College line, and then Othman, who I'm not super high on. So I think it kind of sucks when you look at this team because they have no youth coming up.
Like even their backup goalie's almost 40 years old, and he's one of the best backup goalies in the league. But still, it's kind of funny. But it's a great short-term move. I'm curious to see what they do with the long-term here because there are some implications that are going to come down the pipe. Moving on to what it was for the Canucks. So I get it. Look, here's the thing. People were talking about it had to be Miller or Pettersson. It was always going to be Miller. Miller's a better player right now, but Pettersson is younger. He has more upside, and he's a better defender. Right? Like, they lost the trade. Can we agree on that?
Easily.
I think they did, but here's the thing. Like, they did the best they could, considering Miller had to waive his clause too. So you couldn't just trade him wherever the hell they wanted. I think Cheadle has potential. Like, the hope, I think, is similar to Kako, where if you give him an enhanced role and more ice time, his production will increase. I think his floor is like a third-line center. Upside is maybe a good second-line guy. Yeah.
And I think that's fine too, right? Because like you're going to slot Pettersson as your first-line center. Yeah. So you don't need Hedel to become like a first-line center. Obviously, if Hedel somehow got there, even better, obviously. But if he just becomes a second-line center, that's fine, I guess. You have the rest of the pieces. You have enough wingers, so like the rest of your top six is still fine the way it is, right?
Yeah.
So
and you do shed like around $4 million, which sucks obviously because I mean Miller is worth his contract, but you do shed, which rising cap can help. Mancini has potential too as a former first. I think this hurts their cup potential this year, absolutely. Similar to Colorado, and honestly, actually worse than Colorado. It hurts them potentially down the road because if Cheadle doesn't end up filling that second line center role, like they're in the market for one and they need one.
Yep, they're gonna have a massive hole in their top six, essentially.
Yeah, and like this roster feels really thin outside. I do like the first line. Obviously, I love Hughes and Roenick, but like the rest of this team is just feels kind of spare partsy right now.
Also, they have a lot of question marks too, because I think especially in net with Demko, right? Because Demko's got that degenerative injury, right? And you don't know at what point that's just going to fall apart. Because with those kind of injuries, it's extremely tricky to predict and understand.
Right, and like think about it this way: their second line as of their last game played was Philip Hedel, Drew O'Connor, and Connor Garland. Like, what? Let me just to put this in perspective again. I know people are gonna say I'm biased because I'm a Stars fan. Like, the Stars' second line is Matt Duchene, Jamie Benn, Mav Borg. Their third line is Granlund, Stankoven, and Dadonov. Again, just as a point of comparison, if you're comparing Stanley Cup contenders.
Well, I was going to argue I don't think the Canucks are contenders anymore at this point, so I think it's fair just to take them out of that
That's
race,
what I mean. Like, I feel like this was a step back this year, which sucks because, again, one game away last year from making the Western Conference Final. And it could, hopefully it works out, but this could be really damaging down the road too if Hedel doesn't work out.
I think it's just one of those years where I think everything's just kind of sort of gone wrong, right? You know, the Demko injury to start. It's funny because I think Lankinen actually stepped up and performed really well for them given the circumstances, right? But then again, the Miller Pettersson feud forcing the Miller to get traded out of here, and not only that, but because you gave Miller that no movement, or I think it's no trade clause, right? You basically had to get our no movement clause. You basically had to get him to waive it, and when you have to force someone to waive it, you only have you only have like one or two options. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like it's not, you have to pick between the rotten apple on the ground or the apple that has a worm in it. Like worm in
this one definitely has a worm in it.
This has the worm in it. Yeah, exactly.
And here's the last thing I think this can't be said enough. No more excuses for Elias Pettersson, man. Like, he's been so mediocre since he received that extension last year. He was invisible
It's funny because as soon as Miller got traded, the first game without him, -2. Just pure and simple as that.
It's just there's no more excuses. Since he got that extension, those last 2 months, he was so mediocre. He was bad in the playoffs, almost invisible at times. And this year, he hasn't been good either. So the team chose you. You're the franchise guy. You better show it. That's it. Like, there's no, I don't know what Vancouver has to do anymore to say you and Hughes are the franchise. But like, at least Hughes is playing like an MVP candidate. You need to start doing the same, Elias Pettersson.
Well, I was gonna say too, he finished with 89 points in 82 games, so for him to fall off and still be above point per game, I don't know how hot of a start did he have at the start of like last.
He was really good.
Well, you had him in fantasy. I was gonna actually ask you because you had him in fantasy, so you probably know. But I think it's crazy. I don't know. I mean, see, the problem with Pettersson too is he's always been really frustrating to watch as a player too, because you know his talent, you know what he can do. You see the flashes. You saw it during that year where he got 102 points. You finally saw that 100-point potential come through, and then you watched him the next year. He started red hot, and you thought he was going to be the same player again. And then he, after getting paid, he decided that getting paid was all that mattered because apparently the last 2 months just faded. And then this year he's got 33 points in 45 games and he's struggling. He's a -5. And he doesn't, I hate to say this, but he doesn't seem to be doing anything right.
It's just when you watch him on the ice, there's moments where you see the flashes, but it's not consistent. And again, when you're paying a guy what you're paying him, you need that consistency. And what's crazy is, like, again, when we talk about those contracts, the Rantanen thing about not paying Rantanen, it's funny because Pettersson got what he got, which I think was around 11.5, 11.8, something like that.
11.6, but yeah.
Yeah. So
close enough.
I mean, Rantanen's definitely worth, if he's getting paid 11.6, Rantanen's definitely worth close to 13. Just going to throw that out there.
And I'd even argue Rantanen's worth 15, man.
In an open market, again, with the rising cap, wouldn't rule it out.
It's worse too because you also traded the other guy that was consistent.
Yeah, really.
Because I hate to say this, JT Miller was consistently hitting 80 something points. Like he did, like you paid him, I think around, was it 8 point something?
Also, JT Miller is a great playoff player. Like if you watch that Oilers series last year, he was such a problem for McDavid at times. Like, and he's one of those guys you can just square up. Like there's some first lines you can't square up against the other first lines. Like, whereas JT Miller is one of those guys you can absolutely square up against the first line.
Yeah,
overall,
I'm looking at the stats now. Miller had 99, 82, 103 points. Yeah. The actual consistency.
Again, I think overall, like, the Rangers win this trade. Maybe it hurts them long term, but right now they're obviously better. And I think the Canucks right now are worse, and that's pretty much it there.
Also, if you're the Rangers, it doesn't matter. I feel like I don't want to say it doesn't matter if it hurts you long term, because right now you're only worried about the short term, anyways, right? Because you have all these pieces in place, and you're struggling the way you are. You have to make a move. It doesn't matter
Rangers,
how much
you'll just get the next star that hits free agency anyway, so it's fine.
or you'll just trade with a California team just to unload them anyway, so it's fine.
Like, it's fine. Like, I don't know. I'm trying to think. Like, somebody on the Ducks will be disgruntled. Like, Zegras will be disgruntled, get traded to New York, and be a point per game player again.
He'll hit like 120 points or something ridiculous, and then
all right.
There's your Panarin replacement.
Moving on to the other Pettersson related movement. The Canucks traded for Marcus Pettersson, which actually, this is a move I do like. So they took the first round pick that New York gave them in this trade, and they traded it to the Penguins for Marcus Pettersson. I don't have much to say. I like this move for both teams. I think Vancouver had a serious defensive depth issue after Hughes and Ronek, and adding Pettersson as a third guy was a good move. I think he's a solid second pairing defenseman, and that's what he's going to do. If I'm Pittsburgh, this is a great deal of business. I got a first round pick for a guy who's going to be a UFA anyway. Again, I have no problems with this trade. It just sucks because you're adding a guy who's going to be a UFA if you're Vancouver, but you traded Miller, so what's.
I don't know. I think that's what kind of confused me because it doesn't make. You made a move to improve your team for this year. Then you made but you also made a move to make your team worse for this year. It just, again, it's the same situation as Colorado. It doesn't make any sense because Colorado traded for to improve their goaltending situation for.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say just for this year, but probably for this year, next year, and everything. But then they also traded one of their best players to make their offense worse and their depth only slightly better, right? So to me, the trade didn't really make a lot of sense.
The only reason it makes sense is if it's just because it seems like the Miller-Pettersson situation was so untenable that they had to. And this trade just seems like it was going to be in the works anyway. So
I guess, but it's like, I don't know. To me, I feel like if you're going to trade Miller, you might as well just punt on this year.
Fair. No, that's valid. Like, again, that's the only criticism I have for the Canucks. I do like the player. I don't like the long-term fit because he is a UFA. He might not be re-signed.
I was going to joke, there is no long-term fit.
Yeah. But I do like it for Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's finally doing what they need to do. It's collect assets. It's begin rebuilding. I love it for Pittsburgh. Again, for Canucks, again, like the player, don't understand the trade. All right. Next piece here. Logan Thompson signed he finally has a home for the long term. He signed what were the contract terms again? It was
6 years for $35.1 million, which equates to $5.85 million per year. Which I think this is becoming a common trend with goalies. I think a lot of these goalies nowadays is they don't have a lot of track record, but then they're getting paid these. I guess now they're going to be considered mid-range contracts because if an elite goalies are getting paid around 10, 11 million, a 5.85, a 5.5, a 6 million, it seems kind of like a midpoint kind of contract. So a lot of these unproven goalies, hedge contracts. Like Blackwood got the same thing, right? He got paid around, was it 5 points?
Blackwood, Decor, Jari. Like, here's the thing. $5 million for a start, your 1A goalie, so a guy who's going to take your majority of the starts, just seems like the market rate at minimum. So again, Decord got it for basically 40 games last year. Yeah, Jari got it when he was with Pittsburgh,
and Thompson got it for essentially about 100-ish games. I was going to play a little bit of an exercise with you. So goalie A has 130 games, NHL games. They're 78, 34, and 14, and they have a .915 save percentage and a .255 goals against average with 2 shutouts. Goalie B has 248 games, a 248 goals against average, a .920 save percentage, and 18 shutouts. I'm just kind of curious.
Career?
Yeah, career. Can you guess who goalie B is? Because I kind of gave away goalie A already, but can you guess who goalie B is?
Goalie A is Thompson, I would assume.
Yes, goalie A is Thompson.
His first year was 908. Sorry, his career was 270, you said?
For goalie B?
Yeah.
So goalie B had 248 games played, 248 goals against average, .920 save percentage, 18 shutouts, and his overall record is 152-70. So this isn't with 249 games now.
It's not Blackwood.
152, 76, and 19.
Yeah, it's not Blackwood. So you have to be on a winning team as well. Not Blackwood. It's Jake. That save percentage is too high for Jake Ottinger. That's your Demko?
Oh no! So goalie B is actually Igor Shesterkin.
Okay. Oh shit. Okay.
So I think that's the only risk with this contract is obviously Shesterkin has a more proven track record, so that's why
plays more volume.
So he got paid what he did. But I think that's why I'm not completely against the Thompson. Like I'm actually
I
okay
love
with
this move. Actually, I love it. Like this is an A+ to me for again. GMBM is just killing it in Washington. This is another example. Like again, $5 million is the floor to do business here. Decord got it. Jack Campbell got it with the Oilers. Tristan Jarry got it with the Penguins. Blackwood got it. Like that $5 million something is just always going to be what it is. And here's the thing: I have no problem with the team who trades for a goalie, evaluates him, and then makes the decision on the extension. Colorado did it with Blackwood. Seattle did it with Decord. Cap's doing it with Thompson. I have no problem with it. Thompson's been at worst a league average goalie. At best this year, he's going to be in Vezina discussions. He obviously won't win, but he's going to be in Vezina discussions. I have no problem. I love this move for Washington. I think the Thompson Lindgren pairing as well is a really good pairing, and to lock up a goalie, and I think if the way they locked him up, it's basically through his prime years.
Yeah.
So there's the only.
And I think his contract expires. Well, I mean, I was gonna say his contract probably expires around his mid 30s, which I think mid 30s is the perfect time for you to let go of any kind of player, right? Because that's when the father time starts to hit.
Yeah.
And I think with Thompson, the only risk is he has I don't want to say unproven track record, but he doesn't have as much of a track record as other goalies that got paid, right? But I think that's becoming a common trend where you saw it with Decord, 40-something games. You saw it with Blackwood, I guess in this case, 30-something games, right? Although I guess you could argue it was a little bit more because he showed in San Jose he was good. It was just more of a San Jose problem. And then Jari too.
I think the argument is just he's not going to ever be a high volume starter. But again, that's why you're getting him for five and change and not like you're paying Hellebuck for 10 because he starts around 60 games a year. Yeah, you're not. I don't think Thompson's ever going to get to that volume, but that's fine. And honestly,
yeah, if he starts 50 games, you're fine with that. You're going to pair him with another guy that gets paid around. I think Lindgren's around 3.5 right now. He's going to be a UFA, but I mean 3.5 for him. If you get him back on like a 3.5-4 million kind of deal, you're paying both your goalies for $9 million to take all 82 of your starts. I actually think that's the perfect way to go about it. If you're a team that can't get one of these goalies.
I think it's great. I think, and also, if nothing else, like if this year's shown anything, like Thompson fits how the Caps play, and they've played well around him, and it's a good situation for him too. It's a really good pair. Like the decor, even with Carlson's decline a bit, still really good. There's a lot of young upside on this team as well. I just think it's a great move all around. I love what Brian McClellan again.
I want to say this, but it feels like the Caps hit. Like I don't want to say they're hitting perfect, but they hit perfect on pretty much all their moves.
Brian McClellan to me. I know he hasn't won this iteration hasn't won a cup, but he's hitting that like Bill Zito level of he's just not missing right now, and it's actually it's frightening to watch a team that I thought was gonna have to go into a deep dark rebuild, and yet here they are top of the Metro. Like it's crazy, and they're set up. Like I love this move. I'm all in on Logan Thompson.
I think Washington as a whole, though, I think over the past few years, they kind of just they've made the right moves, right? Starting with, Dylan Strome, he struggled as of late, but he's been essentially a point per game player, right? And getting a guy like that in free agency for as cheap as what they got him for is pretty good. Again, getting Spencer Carberry to be their coach, again, another good move. I think it was good for them to trust an unproven assistant rather than kind of going through the retreads of head coaches that you could have gone through. And then again, McClellan making all the right signings. I think Chychrun's been hit so far. Matt Roy's helped their penalty kill. I think their penalty kill is one of the top 5 in the league. I mean, you have Ovi playing with the Renaissance here. You got rid of Kemper's crappy contract and you turned Dubois into an actual, I don't want to say an actual asset. And he looks like he actually gives, I don't want to say he looks like he gives a shit out there. He looks like he gives a shit out there.
I think everything. I just like that they buck convention with a lot of the moves, right? Like, again, you said Carberry assistant coach, trading for Thompson, who had a very limited sample size. And people are very hesitant to trade with Vegas because they've just been cleaning up on the trade side. Again, the Dubois trade was routinely and Florida did that too. And I do like teams that just stick to they don't just go with convention and they kind of just stick to what their internal system tells them and makes moves. I like it. Again, to me, this is an A+ signing, unless Thompson turns into a pumpkin, which you can't predict anyway. So,
well, I mean, I was going to say the other thing with goalies, I think goalies in the NHL now are just, apart from the elite guys, it is very unpredictable. Yeah. You could have a guy be in Vezina conversation one year, and the next year he might be, I don't want to say one of the bottom 5 goalies, but he could be a bottom 10 goalie. All of a sudden,
but for 5.8 or whatever, who cares?
Yeah, and again, Thompson's never shown that he has been that bottom 10. He's at least been average. Goal save above expected has never been below 0.
Mm. Yeah, well, I'm good.
He's never going to hurt you, essentially.
Yeah. Moving on to the last trade, my Stars are in this one. It's not a big, so I thought there would be something else different down the pipe, but I'm fine with it. So the Stars acquired Mikael Granlund and Cody Ceci from the Sharks for I think it's a protected first. I can't remember. And it's a 4th that could turn into a 3rd if they make the cup. But let's just say a 1st and a 4th, basically.
Well, it's I think it's an unprotected first, but I mean.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, unprotected first, and I
think
the 4th
conditional
is
third.
Yeah.
Conditional. Well, it's a conditional 3rd. Yeah, it could become a 4th, I think. But I mean, I think for Dallas, you're just trying to boost your depth, right? You already have one of the some of the best depth in the league, and you're just kind of boosting it. I think with the Sagan injury that happened, you're just trying to load up.
this is one of those years where the Stars can be aggressive because Sagan's on IR. Probably the Stars will finally get that LTIR boost because he's only going to be ready for the playoffs. And Niels Lundqvist was recently just declared out for the year. So the Stars' issue has always been depth defensemen beyond that first pairing of Heiskanen and whoever they put. Usually, sometimes it's Harley, sometimes it'll vary. But with Heiskanen being out week to week, they really need some defensive depth because right now their first pairing the last game was Lyubushkin and Harley, which was.
I mean, I think the second one you're fine with. The first one, as someone who watched Lyubushkin play in Toronto, yeah, I'm good. Thank you. You can stay on my third pairing, bro.
I think if there's a year to be aggressive with the injuries they have, this is the year. I think there's going to be another signing for sure. Granlund is great forward depth. He's been really good in San Jose, and he's one of those guys where you can't like he's how do I explain it? He's not good with limited minutes because like what he does doesn't really shine in limited minutes. And Dallas does a good job of rolling their lines out equally, so he will get time.
So it's like the Carolina model, the everybody kind of plays. Yeah. Exactly. Okay, so I think Granlund will be fine in Dallas. Plus, I don't want to say he's better. I'd argue he's around. I don't want to say better players than in San Jose. I mean, obviously he got to play a little bit of Southern Breeze.
Well, there's less pressure on the flaws of his game because of the depth around him.
Yeah.
It's obviously like there is a lot of, and it's a nice mix of guys there. Also, the center depth is insane, and Peter DeBoer has shown he doesn't mind rotating guys in and out. Like Hintz has moved anywhere from the first line to the second line to the third line. Johnson's moved from the center to the wing slot, depending on how they like. It's a very malleable roster. The Stars' depth right now is insane on the offensive end. If Heiskanen gets back healthy, I think it's gonna be. I think CC adds like at least at worst case he's a Dumba replacement.
Oh yeah, you were telling me how much you hated watching Dumba play. I could have told you about that. Ever since that, I think that ACL injury he had when he was in Minnesota, I don't think he's been quite the same ever since.
But I think in the best case, CC Phil, he's a fine second, like he's a fine bottom four defenseman. I do think
I'd argue he's more of a third pairing defenseman, but I think sure. if you're the Stars, right? Okay, I'm just gonna pull up. Okay, but don't spill out all the names here. But I'm just gonna pull up like their lines right now, and I'm gonna assume once they get healthy, like what their defensive core is gonna look like. It's gonna be some combination of Harley, Lindell, Heiskanen, and then Bichelle. As I would argue that's probably your top four, like your four best defensemen. Look, if you have Lyubushkin and CC as your bottom six,
yeah,
I think that's perfectly fine. Because first of all, you're not going to be playing them that much. Second of all, they're good third pairing defensemen. That's what they're going to do, and that's what they're meant to do.
No, I do think there's my wish list is Vince Dunn as like if they can find a way.
That is I don't want to say that's a pipe dream, but like damn, like that would. I think you'd have you probably have the best decor in the league at that point.
Like that's again, we'll talk about on the tier list, but like a guy like that, or even, like something along those lines would be nice. But yeah, like there's gonna be another trade for a defenseman coming down the pike. I just don't know who or what it is. But overall, I like this move for Dallas. Again, this is a year to be aggressive. I don't even mind trading the picks because Dallas, like, they have so many young guys on.
Well, I mean, I hate to say this, but that pick's going to be like 20, like somewhere between the 25 to 32 range, right?
Yeah.
And late first rounders I don't want to say they don't typically equate to much, but the variant, there's a lot more variance. There's a lot more variance with the late first rounders. So I think you're fine just trading it because the reality is it is hard to hit on a really good NHL player in the late first round.
Yeah.
Like you can do it. It's just not great. Plus, I mean, if you're going to go for a cup, some sacrifices have to be made. So whichever young guy's getting drafted in that slot, sorry about that.
Also, the Stars have so many young guys on ELCs right now. Like just on the roster alone, right? Wyatt Johnston, Mav Bork,
Logan Stankoven, yep.
Thomas Harley and Ian Bichelle all playing like significant roles right now. Like I don't mind trading a first again. And I do think at some point you do have to go in, and I think this is one of those years with, again, the LTIR room available. I think this is the year.
So my question is, before Sagan got hurt, was he still playing center or was he playing more on the wing? Because I know his injuries have kind of taken some of his ability away from him.
Either or, because sometimes they'd put Duchesne on the wing and sometimes they'd put Sagan. They put Sagan on. Honestly, like that's the weird thing about the Stars roster. It's outside of like I think Robertson and who's just flanked first line left the entire year. Everybody's moved around somewhere.
So I think
it's hard to
just
say.
just to show the viewers how scary this could be, your four centers could be Hintz, Duchesne, Granlund, and Sagan,
And Sagan.
as your first four. And
Not
that
to
would
mention
be
if Marchment comes back healthy, like the wings are actually crazy on this team too, because you're gonna have Robertson, potentially Johnston, Ben, Marchment, Dadonov, Stankoven.
Maverick Bork.
Yeah, like it's again, I'm fine with this trade for Dallas. I don't have any issue with it. Again, it's a contending team, and these are the trades contenders make.
You have to make some sacrifices somewhere.
Yeah. All right. Moving on to the last thing. So a lot of these talks about these trades and some of these contracts, again, have kind of centered around one thing. The NHL and NHLPA recently announced figures for the cap, and basically it's going to rise a substantial amount in the next 4 years. Can you just pull up the specific numbers?
Yep. So I'll start with it. So this year's cap is currently $88 million. So next year's cap will be $95.5 million. So that's going to be a $7.5 million increase. So that's basically, essentially, I call that room for another, like a pretty significant player. Mm-hmm. And then in 2026, 2027, it's going to rise to 104. So that's going to be another $8.5 million from next year to the year after. And then in 27 and 28, it's going to be 113.5. So that's going to be another $9.5 million increase from the next year to the next
4
year.
It's going to basically increase like $30 million.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah.
So
30. I'm trying to do the math really quickly. 25.5. But yeah,
that's my quant right there. So basically, here's the thing: if you're a team that already got a superstar on a deal, like that McKinnon at 12-ish, that Draisaitl at 14. In the next couple of years, those are going to be steals.
I was gonna throw Matthews in there. I was gonna throw Matthews in there too, but
yeah, even Sam Reinhart, like that Reinhart deal now looks like a steal. And a lot of guys now, because of the rising cap that are coming up, are the real beneficiaries of this. So a guy like Cale Makar, who's the best at his position, coming up in 2 years with the cap going up is. Like I said, you're going to see guys break 15 million. Mitch Marner coming up is Mitch Marner next year?
No, he's a free agent this year.
Okay, so yeah, he's going to get paid. Even a guy like Marty Necas, who is in the Rantanen trade, who comes up next year, if he's going to be in that 70 to 80 point range, the value of those guys, everybody's value rises with the cap going up. So even a guy like Necas might be looking at close to around $10 million. And it's not going to be weird because that's just the nature of cap percent. Like when players get paid, yes, they get paid their fixed salary, but the fixed salary is always looked at as what is the percentage of the cap that you're getting paid? Now the guys, unfortunately, the players who had to sign during the flat cap years got screwed. Let's not sugarcoat it. But now that the cap's lifting up, the guys who are coming up are going to be major benefactors, and you're going to see some weird contract distributions where some guys are going to get paid and look like it's going to look weird that Marner is going to be making more than McKinnon. But again, it's the nature of it, right?
Well, I was going to say too, I don't know if we saw this example. I think we saw it with you remember when the NBA had that back in 2016 or 2017?
Yes,
or that,
the
Timofey
they had that massive
I'm wondering if we're going to see a lot more of those depth guys get paid, and then we're going to see like
bad
massive
contracts.
Regrets. Yeah, I think there's going to be an increase in bad contracts, right? You're going to see someone such
definitely
as
count on the Rangers for one of those for sure.
You're going to see like the Rangers sign. I don't know. I'm going to try to throw out a random name. I don't know, like maybe like a fourth line. Is there any fourth liner you can think of that's coming up on a UFA contract? I'm just trying to think of a random example. They're going to get paid like 5 or 6 mil, something ridiculous, and then you're going to see a lot more of those Luol Deng, like the Mozgov contracts that you talked about in the NBA, right?
I think it's interesting because the Oilers, so they got lucky with Draisaitl, but when McDavid and Bouchard come up, those are going to be bank breaking. I think, kind of like they're teams that it like the teams I think that it really helped, like that this news came out later was again. Edmonton being able to get Draisaitl for what they did. I think Colorado being able to get McKinnon for what they did. Guys who were able to sign their star players for even like the Devils and Jack Hughes, I think, is another example. Guys who are able to sign their star players for what it was under the flat cap. I think the teams that hurt, it's weird. It hurts and helps, right? Because a team like Toronto, where Marner
It
is
helps with Matthews. It hurts with Matthew or Marner. Sorry, it hurts with
right,
Marner,
like,
and then helps with Matthews.
and it helps with Nylander, right? So it's like a combination of guys who, they're guys who already signed their deals, but they're guys who. But now here's the thing: a team like Toronto has more wiggle room. So now that if they have their stars locked up, they can go get more depth pieces, which has always
And they can
been a
get
struggle.
they can
for
always
them.
get higher paid depth pieces that they normally wouldn't be able to get. Instead of settling for those like $1 million, $2 million players, you might be able to get a guy for 3, 4, or 5 even with how much extra cap space you're getting, right? So I wonder if this really just. I mean, I think it helps the juggernauts a lot more than the. Because I hate to say this, but a team that's like in the lottery, a lot of times they're just struggling to hit the cap, like at the cap floor. Although maybe you might see some more changes too, where the teams at the cap floor that have to reach the cap floor now, I guess like they can take on more bad contracts for I guess like better assets too. So I don't know. It'd be kind of interesting to see how it all plays out.
I think a major player in free agency next year is going to be Columbus because, unfortunately, with what happened with Johnny Gaudreau, but like they were struggling to get to the cap floor this year, but next year with the cap rising, they don't have
Well, the other thing too is all their players are young and they're all on I want to say entry level contracts. Apart from I think Werenski's obviously one of their older guys getting paid, but I think Marchenko's still on his. I could be wrong. I think he's still on his entry level if I'm not mistaken. I might be wrong about that. But someone like Kent Johnson, Cole Sillinger, I think Voronkov as well. A lot of those guys are on like lower contracts, right? So they have the money to pay somebody. The only problem is obviously a lot of times Columbus hasn't historically been a place where people have chosen to willingly go.
Yeah.
Right.
I think a team this really benefits that no one's talking about is Tampa. So one, Tampa has all their key guys signed till at least I think Kucherov's up in 27, 28. But for the next like 2 to 3 years, all their guys are like basically locked in. So Points locked in for 9-5, Gensel's locked in for 9, Hagel's locked in for 6-5, Sorelli's locked in for 6.2, Hedman's locked in for 8, and Vasilevsky's locked in for 9-5. They have no contracts coming up except Kucherov, and they also have the Florida income tax boost, the no income tax boost, and the cap is going up. Like a team like Tampa, a team like Florida, who already have all their major contracts done, and now have more cap space to play with to fill out those extra slots. It's going to be crazy for teams like that. And again, teams like Columbus, Chicago, Detroit, who can just frolic in free agency because they're already struggling to get to the ceiling, and now they have all these guys on ELCs and they can throw money at whatever prominent free agent just comes up. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this all plays out.
I feel like in maybe 1 or 2 years we could do an episode on all the really bad contracts we've seen out of free. Or like in 2-3 years we can do an episode where we rank the 3 worst contracts from like the cap from this massive cap bump, right? We could do what I was going to joke like Utri did with that video with the NBA. That'd be kind of funny.
It just opens up. I love it because it opens up so much. One, I love that players get paid what they deserve because NHL players have been underpaid for way too long. Let's just be honest here. But I love how many interesting possibilities opens up. Like if you're a team like San Jose, like I think all their buyouts basically come off this year. I mean, they have a little bit of buyout retention, but it's like 2 million. It's like 4 million total. But you can really get a guy like you can really get some star players to maybe accelerate the rebuild around Celebrini if you want. You can trade for a massive player if you'd like. Like there's a lot of possibilities with teams like them, like Columbus, like Anaheim. And then there's also again teams that have their contracts done who can now just afford to add a really good like Tampa can add a secondary a playmaking defenseman behind Hedman now that they have this room available that they didn't have, right? So I love this. I'm a fan of it. I'm really curious to see how teams play this out.
Well, I was also going to argue too. I think it's really, really good for the players too, right? Because I think the NHL, their star players are one of the, like among some of the lowest paid, like I guess like major sport athletes, right? So I think it's nice to see them just get more money too. Because I hate to say this, but with the football guys, like the QBs are getting like 40, 50 million. Whereas I hate to say this, but let's look at McKinnon's getting like a fourth of that.
Yeah.
So it's just nice to see the other players just get. It's just nice to see the NHL players finally getting paid a lot more.
It also opens up a lot of cool trade possibilities where teams now with more cap space can take on maybe higher priced players, and it just opens up more versus before it was like, okay, well, what can you really do? We're tight by this cap.
Yeah, you have to do the good old retain and bring in a third team, right? I think now you don't have to bring in the third team or even retain. Potentially, you don't even have to retain depending on the trade, right? So
I do think because of that, we'll see maybe more player for player trades because a lot of the retention comes with picks. I don't think that. So that's what sucks if you're a rebuilding team. Actually, funnily enough, is rebuilding teams used to be able to weaponize cap space and take. Yeah,
now the cap space you can't really weaponize it the same. You probably still can to an extent, but it's probably a lot.
But you're not getting like first round picks like you used to.
Yeah.
So like, what would you say are your like with the cap boost this offseason would be like your teams to watch? Would you say? Because for me, it's Tampa, Florida, Chicago, Minnesota, and Detroit, I think.
Well, I had Anaheim as one of mine. Well, if obviously they get rid of Cronin.
If they fire Cronin.
If they fire Cronin, that's one. I'm going to pull it up here. Calgary's interesting. I mean, they have they have a lot of older guys, but like I guess with Wolf, they finally figured out their goalie situation. Maybe they should have around. I mean, they currently have around I think 17 million in cap space, right? So with the rising cap, that's going to be another 24.5, and then whatever UFAs that they have to let go of, right? So they're going to have a lot of cap too. It's funny because Nashville
weird because they made we'll talk about this in a second. The Kuzmenko. They traded Kuzmenko and Pelche for Farabee and Frost, but I thought they were rebuilding, so it was weird to me that they made that trade. So I don't know what they're doing. Like, are they rebuilding? Are they not?
I was actually fine with the trade because I don't like. I hate to say this, but Kuzmenko wasn't going to do very much for them. Like you kind of saw when he played, he wasn't doing very much anyways. And I think Pelche, he was a solid prospect. He just wasn't getting it done in Calgary, so you knew he kind of needed to change the scenery. And I'm fine with getting Frost and Farabee because I think those two guys were the two guys where you were thinking, well, maybe a change of scenery will help, right? Just because those two guys are still sort of young. They're not as young as you'd like them to be, but I mean they're still around mid-20s. Maybe if they change the scenery, it could help them figure it out. I think that's what the trade was in a nutshell.
That's fair. They're interesting because I don't know what their plan is. So, but yeah, no, they are.
But they also have the cap space to weaponize, right? So now they have they can. I don't want to say they can go either way, but they really could go either way. They could still kind of stay on track, or they could try to accelerate with all the cap
I'd love
space
to see Columbus get aggressive. I think if they can get a really good goalie, a secondary defenseman behind Werenski, and a wing, I really think they could challenge for the playoffs next year. Like, I mean, and like they're challenging right now, but I mean, be a stronger playoff contender. Like to me, they're like I don't want to say Rantanen would fit there, but like a guy like Rantanen and then a secondary defenseman would just be great. I think for the way they have that structured, especially with
I think the problem is the goaltending market kind of looks bleak. I don't really see. There's not really any names that really stand out. I think Aiden Hill is probably the best name, but obviously injury risk. Frederick Anderson, injury risk, and he's old. I'm not paying Sixiev or Georgiev or Forgiev as people call him. Vejmelka's intriguing, but. And then
I get what you mean. I just think there's more possibilities. Like I said, overall, I love the rising cap because, like you said, players get paid more. There's more possibilities, and there's going to be teams that are going to do like smart GMs are really going to take advantage of this, and it's going to be so fun to watch.
I guess we'll see. I guess maybe in a few years we can do. I'm kind of curious. In a few years, I really would like to come back and rewatch this pod, see all the comments we made, and see how many of these actually translated, how many of these backfired. Where it's like, oh, maybe we'll see more player-to-player trades, and we somehow see more picks and player trades still somehow.
We'll talk about it when we do the trade tier list, but like I think while a lot of the guys have been on trade already, with the rising cap, there's a lot more trade possibilities. But yeah, I love this overall for the league.
I mean, anytime there's more cap space, I think it usually just benefits everyone, except if you're the NBA, because then it backfired for them 2 years later. But
all right, was there any other trade topics, signing topics you want to talk about, or?
I guess nothing I had down. I was looking. The only other one I had on my list was the Perunovic for a 5th, but that was more of a. I thought Perunovic would have been something by now.
The Islanders just need bodies right now. I don't care about that trade.
Yeah. Well, I think the whole thing was Perunovic was supposed to be. St. Louis fans thought he was supposed to be more, but he just never turned out right. And again, they're just going to move on from him.
One of the guys they gave up done was the Moore. Like that's the guy.
Yeah, that's the guy that ended up being the guy that they should have kept. Yeah.
All right. Well, that was all our trade talk. Again, I think we did pretty well going in depth on a lot of these. Now it's our next segment, our running Guess That Player. So here, for people that don't know, every week we do, or every podcast we do a segment where one of us presents a player and the other one has to guess it. 3-point scoring system. 3 if you get it on the first go. 2 if you get it after the first hint. 1 if you get it after the last hint. 0 if you don't get it. For one of the hints is always either where the player was born or when they were drafted, basically. And right now I'm up 2-1 going in. This is our 3rd week doing this. So Willie Dubs has to nominate or present the player to me, and I got a guess here. So let's.
Well, I'm going to see if I can try to. I'm going to see if I can try to share. Let's see if this works, because I am on. For those who don't know, I am on a new computer, sadly. So, let's see. Share.
You have like Murphy's. Like, people are saying he has like Murphy's Law level luck with computers. Like I can run through. Knock on wood, because I don't want this to be the other way around. Like I've ran through the same computer. I use the same computer usually for like 2, 3, 4 years, and some 5 in a lot of cases. He goes through like maybe 3 in like 1 sometimes.
Okay, so before I share my screen to preface, I think the first thing is that I went through a ThinkPad for about 5 years of uni. That broke down on me during exam season. Then I used a Mac to get through exam season. Then I bought my gaming laptop, which I've had to replace already once because of issues. And now the second time, let's just say little bit of some damage to it on the inside, and I've had to send it in for repairs.
I'm lucky. Like I've had this it's the Samsung Galaxy Pro 2 Book 360 or something. I'm lucky. I've had this for like a year or 2 now, and yeah, no issues. All right, hit me with the player, Willie Dubs. Let's do this.
All right, I'm gonna try to share this. Let's see what happens. Let's see, share screen window. Okay, let's see if you see that.
Okay, wow. This is interesting, actually. You know what I think I hate? So you know the one award I never know who wins every year is the one this guy gets like nominated for all the time. Holy shit, 132 points? And 92. Oh my, okay. Wow. This is really interesting. It's a weird career. What the hell? So 132 points and he didn't crack the top all-star team is wild.
Also, imagine only being fifth in Hart voting that year.
5th in Hart voting. What's crazy too is one thing you notice about back then is how little statistics there were beyond like those, which is interesting.
It's weird because this guy only had 100 points twice, but like he had a pretty good career overall.
Played for Dallas too. Played for St. Louis.
I had to pick the Dallas guy just to troll you. I'm just kidding.
It's not Guy Carbonneau.
Well, I was gonna say if Guy Carbonneau scored this many points.
Yeah, Guy Carbonneau did not score 132 points.
Do you want a hint or
he's
no?
He's a center. I have to think about this. So, peak years were with those Stars teams. Langenbrunner,
Well,
Hull, Lettinen, Medano, Neuendijk. No. But he came a bit after. It's not Jason Arnott. Played for Montreal in the 90s. Was interesting. Not Domfus was like the guy back then, but it wouldn't have been him. Then he went to lockout year. Then went to Colorado. Interesting. This one's Selke-ish level forward. I mean, 1,327 points and 1,294 games is
like this guy's pretty good. This guy's pretty good. Just saying, it's
good,
not.
yeah.
He ain't some random scrub off the street. That's all I'm saying.
Who is really? No. Scott Mellenby played for the Panthers, so it's not him. It's not Doug Waite, not Keith Tkachuk. Jamie Langenbrunner started with Dallas, so it wouldn't have been him, and he obviously didn't. The problem is, like, I don't really know. Like, late '80s, early '90s is always just a tough, like.
Well, I tried to pick a guy where like he at least started like the start of his career was a little bit closer to the early '90s, right? It wasn't like he started in like '82. Like I tried to at least have it around the like the.
Mm-hmm. No, not. It's. I'm just trying to think.
He also at least played into the 2000s at least, so at least that helped. That was supposed to help a little bit, but.
What? I can't believe I'm blanking on this because, like.
Do you need a hint?
The Stars. I'll go with where he was born. Yeah.
So he was born in Canada. Do you want a specific like province or like?
I think province we do need.
Okay, Quebec.
Quebecois. Okay. God. Oh, Jesus Christ. That
actually doesn't really help. I think that actually makes it worse, ironically, because I feel like
the
there's
Stars
always
didn't have a lot of French. It's not Brian Savage. No. Did Brian Savage play for the Stars? Hold on.
Bro, so I don't think Brian Savage put up that many points, man.
Yeah,
Just
maybe. Again, maybe. Trying to think. It's not the Jokinens. This was like that weird Stars team where, like, in that range.
Yeah, because this is like right like 2 years after the cup win, right?
Well, no, like 99. So 98, 99.
Oh, 3 years. It's 3 years after the cup win. Sorry,
99, 2000. They go to the finals and lose to the Devils. And this was kind of like the after of that.
Well, I was also going to say that was the one that Jason Arnott scored the winning goal too, right? Like and
then he joined Dallas the year after. Yeah. So that's what I mean. It's not Arnott. Man, this is so. It's gonna be annoying because
so if you guess it right now, you get 1 point or 2. I forget.
2, and then if I ask you for what he was drafted, which I don't think it will help, it's 1. Why am I blanking right now? This is actually bugging me.
Wait, so yeah, because I was gonna say the score is I think 2-1. Wait, so I got 1 point last time.
2-1.
Yeah, because I asked for both. I think if I'm not mistaken.
No, Vincent did. No, the Montreal one's interesting because Montreal doesn't have a lot of high scorers. Is it? No, it's not Martin Richin. There's no way it's Martin Richinski. This guy had to be really. It's weird. This guy had to be really good at some point.
Yeah, I mean, this guy is really good. Like, I hate to say it, but if you get 1,300 points in your like, you're a point per game player over your career, and you get 1,300 points, you're not a bad player by any stretch.
No, I know. It's just like, why isn't this guy's name just like popping out at me? It's so frustrating. Played for. No, no. Born in Quebec, so
I feel like it's at the tip of your tongue, but you just can't remember who it is. That's what I'm low key thinking.
The 132 points just stand. That's great. Like 130, and the 94 and 69 is actually.
Also, I was gonna say if you get 132 points, for you to be -1 is pretty crazy. Because like
I can't think of a ton of guys that played for the Isles in Montreal, like. And played center, because I know Cherkowski played for both, but obviously he didn't put up these points. He played wing.
Do you want hit number 2?
Sure. When was?
Okay, so what do you? So I'm supposed to give you the what round he was drafted, right?
Yeah.
Or Okay, so he was drafted in the first round.
So first round by Buffalo. Okay. I
Yeah.
mean, like, probably.
Yeah.
Oh, it's such a weird. Who played for the Stars back then? This is bugging me. This is
Also, it's worse too because there's a star. He actually played for the Stars too, which kind of bugs you a bit more, right? Because it's like now you're thinking you should.
But like
know
by
him.
then, he clearly wasn't the same guy. Like if you look at it.
Oh yeah, for sure. He definitely wasn't the same guy by then, but
really good in St. Louis though.
It's funny. He fell apart. He didn't fall apart, but he fell off right after he got to the Stars.
Played center is the one that's bugging me too.
Yo, should I interrupt you with news of an NBA trade or nah?
No, not right now.
Okay.
Man, oh my god, this is bugging me.
Sorry, I just got the news of the trade in the NBA. I'm not gonna spoil it, but like it is shocking.
Is it De'Aaron Fox?
No. Do you want to know the player involved?
Yes.
Luka Doncic.
No. No, I refuse to believe that.
Well, okay, the TSN notification I got, I don't know if it's loading for me. Let me Google it just to make sure I'm not trolling, but yep, it is Luka Doncic. It's involved in the trade.
I'm trying to think like who played for the Stars back then.
Okay, so back to the guessing first before I spoil the trade, but yeah. As you guys all know on the podcast, we are sports. We are lovers of all sports. So, well, the hockey's probably our favorite by far, but you know, we follow all other sports too. So, sorry to interrupt you guys with tidbit news.
Arnott played back then.
The names, I feel like the name's killing you because like I feel like if you don't guess it and I tell you the name, you're gonna be like either what or you're gonna be like no or something like that. I don't know. I can't tell which reaction I'll get out of you if you don't guess it. Although I feel like you should. I am a little bit surprised because like not.
It could be Turgeon, but I don't know if he played in Colorado back then. Is the only thing. But like. I just don't know if he played in Colorado. I'm just gonna guess. I know this is wrong. I'll say Vincent Damphousse, but it's probably not right.
Okay, so it is not Vincent Damphousse. Do you want to know who it is? Yeah. So it is actually it is actually Pierre Turgeon.
Okay, see, like my thing with Turgeon is I forgot he played in Colorado because I know he played in Dallas. Obviously, he played in St. Louis. Is it weird I don't remember the Montreal years at all?
I'm surprised you didn't. I'm surprised you didn't make the connection with the Islanders years because those like early '90s Islanders teams. I don't want to say they didn't have a lot.
I was two, man. I was two.
Okay, but like they didn't have a lot of good players, and I only remember. The only thing I remember about him was you remember in the playoffs when he scored the winning goal, he got hit by was it Dale Hunter?
Yeah, man, that's what I remember. It's crazy. Like you look at this career, and he's always been a borderline Hall of Famer. Which is interesting.
Well, I mean, he is in the Hall of Fame, so
no, but like for a while before he got in, he was right. So it's one of those weird ones where you look at this career on like a stat sheet, and it screams Hall of Fame player, right?
Yeah.
But it's weird how long it took him to get in, because like again, he was in an era where 132 points apparently only gets you fifth in Hart voting, which is wild.
I am actually curious to look. I'm actually going to pull this up now just out of curiosity for all of us. But that was the 90... Which year was it? That was 92,
93. So was that when Gretzky went to LA?
Well, Gretzky went to LA like in 88, but that was the year they went to the Cup Finals. Yeah,
that's what it was. Sorry,
Yeah, so that was the year they went to the Cup Finals when they lost to Montreal in the finals. In terms of leading scorers, who led the league in scoring that year?
Damn it. I'm mad because I did remember he played for Dallas. I just didn't know he played for
It's funny too because you actually said his name too, but and I was debating just giving it to you on the spot, but I was
it's fine.
Because like to be fair, you did the same thing to me with Zidlicki, so I was kind of like, should I just interrupt and say you got him?
I didn't earn it.
Okay, you know what's funny? He was the 6th leading scorer in the league that year.
Who was ahead? What were the point totals?
Mario Mario Lemieux with 160.
Okay.
Pat LaFontaine with 148. Adam Oates with 142. Steve Yzerman with 137. And then Timu Solani with 132, because that was the year Solani came into the league as a rookie and had 76 goals. So
what's crazy is 106 back then, 98-90, didn't even get you like on the ballot too, which is like
sorry, what number of points? 106?
in 1989, 106 just didn't even get you on the ballot. Is crazy.
You know what's funny? Because in 92-93, the person with 106 points was Craig Janney, who we talked about with the whole Shanahan thing. And I think what's kind of funny too, because this, I don't want to say this almost links together with the the Janney Shanahan thing, but Turgeon was the guy drafted ahead of Shanahan.
Oh wow, okay.
Because Turgeon went first
What's
overall.
interesting with him is I do wonder if he's one of those guys that would have benefited from like better analytics. Because if you actually look at it, right, look at his numbers. The year he scored 58 goals, he shot 301 times, but the shooting percentage has like remained for the most part like pretty consistent through his career, right?
Like,
I wonder if he's a guy that would have.
Yeah, 16.
I wonder if he's a guy that would have benefited, but like even like look at those years, right? It goes 20, 18. It's pretty consistent for that stretch, right?
Yeah,
like that 5-6 years. I do wonder if he's one of those guys that would have benefited from like a modern, like the modern day era more so than what it was back then.
Yeah, it's kind of funny too, because I think every time we look at shooters with like a 19-20%, we always say that's kind of high, but like I think nowadays with guys
it's
like,
also on lower volume, which is interesting. Like guys who usually have above insane deviations usually do it because they're low volume shooters that had a breakout one year. This is actually interesting because his breakout happened. He kept the same percentage, but just increased his volume.
And then he almost got 60 goals. That's crazy.
Like,
damn. Also, can I say?
Right, well, yeah.
To be minus one with 132 points is crazy.
I appreciate this one because, like, it's one of those ones where it makes you appreciate players that maybe you wouldn't have appreciated, even though I got it wrong, obviously. But like, it makes you appreciate. It makes you appreciate players that, like, back then, it gives you a different perspective on those guys. Because if you think of Turgeon's career, people always called him like an underachiever. They called him soft because I don't know if you remember the punch out in Piestani. He was the only guy who didn't participate, and that was like a big black mark on him. But like, you look at his overall career, there's a lot of consistency with how good he is, and you have to appreciate that, right?
Yeah, I don't know. He's just I mean, I just find it crazy because like when you look at his stats, like I don't want to say they don't jump out apart from the 132 year, like nothing crazy sort of jumps at you. Like he's pretty good overall, but then like when you look at the end of his career, right, like 1,300 points, and he's like a point per game player throughout his whole, like if you look at his whole 19-year career, he was essentially a point per game player. Mm-hmm. Like that level of like, because I think nowadays like a lot of the guys nowadays I want to say they kind of fall apart around their like 30s, like early 30s. He kind of had that same issue where he did kind of fall a little bit in his early 30s, but even him falling in his early 30s wasn't as like the drop off wasn't as bad compared to some of the other guys. Right?
I don't mind it because he basically played 70 plus games from 18. Like his curve was different, right? Because you're talking about a guy who went from 18 and basically never played less than, like, it seems like for the most part outside.
Yeah, he was always around 70-something games typically. Yeah, like he had a couple years where he was 50 or 40, but like, all right, 83 games. That's crazy. 83 is kind of crazy.
All right, so I got the next one. We're at 2-1. I'm in the slight lead here. Yeah, no, that was cool, man. Thanks, appreciate that. I feel bad now. My Dallas Stars history took a bit. My Dallas Stars brain man ability took a bit of a hit there.
Rest in peace, man.
All right, next week we'll do a trade tier list. So it's going to be a bunch of guys we think should be in play in the deadline. Obviously, apparently, similar to Luka Doncic trades, anyone can be traded. So who knows? But these are the guys we think will be most likely to move, and we'll kind of tier them accordingly and talk about like what teams would fit them the best and where we see them going forward.
Sounds good. I'm all in.
All right. So this was a really long podcast because there was a lot to cover, apparently. So we appreciate you guys joining us. Again, I'm SJ. That's Willie Dubs.
We're signing out.
For us at Toe in the Crease, we're signing out.
See ya.